Hello and welcome to the May edition of the Organic Gardening Podcast. I'm Fiona Taylor, and later on we'll be hearing from chef, author and organic gardener Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. Hugh is widely known for his commitment to seasonal, ethically produced food. His latest cookbook is called High Fibre Heroes, where he finds new ways to put 12 everyday vegetables onto our plates, boosting our health along the way. Many of us followed Hugh's early smallholding experiences by watching the TV series Escape to River Cottage. Having escaped, Hugh then established River Cottage HQ in Dorset in 2004, a working organic smallholding and cafe which serves as the base for a broad range of courses and events. During our chat earlier this year, I toured around River Cottage, discovering Hugh's gardening roots and why he thinks organic growing matters for health, community and the future of food.
Fiona, welcome to the River Cottage kitchen garden. It's not necessarily the warmest of welcomes, although it is a mild day. There are patches of blue sky up there. It's a lot milder than it was a few days ago. But what you're not seeing is an abundance of crops in the ground. We have this tendency at River Cottage at the beginning of the growing season to kind of go back to ground zero. I think that's one of the things about being a sort of supply garden for a very busy kitchen. The chefs are quite voracious in terms of plundering what's in the garden. Look, there's a few stalks over there with a bit of kale bobbling on top. There's some little chives and onions. There's lots of herbs.
There's a few nodding daffodils in the middle to give us a splash of colour.
And they are nodding in the breeze today.
They are. And there's the promise of some wonderful artichokes later on.
Yes, they've been going for years. They just, they keep coming back, and I love this kind of architectural greenery that they offer up through the winter. Otherwise, everything would be looking a bit flat. But of course, what you're mostly seeing is a lot of empty beds, well mulched.
Yep.
We've got a no-dig system here, paths between fairly narrow beds that you don't have to tread on. You can reach the middle of each bed from the path, so it's just sort of, I think, 1.2 meters wide. But there's nothing in them. But there's lots coming through, and in a minute we'll go and have a look at the propagation tunnel, and you'll see all the lovely seedlings. So we don't do a lot of direct sowing. We do some, obviously, when the weather warms up, and we can just put an extra line or two of beans straight in, and then that they'll be following behind the ones that have gone in as seedlings. I find that quite a good way to do successional gardening, is get some seedlings in and put a line of seeds next to them, and then you've got your next lot about 3 or 4 weeks behind. But most of it goes in as seedlings, hoping to beat the slugs. Our garden team here do seem to be very good at beating the slugs, a lot better than I am at home. I seem to battle furiously with slugs in the veg patch at home.
So, talking about gardening at home, then, tell us a bit about that. Have you always gardened? Is it something that is important to you? How does that work in the home?
Appropriately enough, I started properly growing vegetables at River Cottage when we first moved there nearly 30 years ago. I mean, it's actually the first River Cottage series went out in 1999, and we actually had been renting River Cottage. I say we, me and Marie. She was then my girlfriend, now my wife. But we first started having River Cottage in our lives in 1997, and then we made the first series in 1999. Apart from helping my dad at home in Gloucestershire, he is still, aged 90, a passionate grower of veg. But really, at River Cottage, pretty much in the first series, while we were filming, that was my first stab at growing veg. So that was the whole point, really. I was wet behind the ears, downsizing to the country with some hopes and dreams, and with some brilliant help from the legendary Michael Michaud, one of the great growers of the West Country, and obviously famous for specialising in chili plants. He got me going, and I've never looked back. I mean, I've never looked back. I've had loads of disasters and
Yes.
battled with many pests and the weather like every gardener. But in terms of the sheer pleasure of growing and growing organically, I have never looked back. My mum, Jane, is an amazing garden designer. That's been her career. She's had medal-winning gardens at Chelsea. She's designed wonderful gardens all over the UK. She still keeps her hand in, aged 86, and has a beautiful garden in Gloucestershire. But the veg grower is my dad. So my mum and dad moved out of London. It's strange how my sort of downsizing thing at River Cottage really echoed what my mum and dad did in the early 70s, because they moved out of London to a rented farmhouse in Gloucestershire. And we moved in the summer, and there was already a veg garden. The people who'd been living there before us had got a veg garden started, and they'd found their dream home and moved very quickly. And we moved in. And the day we arrived, I remember sitting on the lawn before we even unpacked our suitcases, eating raw carrots that my dad had pulled up from the garden, which the previous tenants had very kindly planted for us.
you. Marvellous.
Which it really was
Yes.
marvellous. And that for all of us as a family, for my dad and for us as a family, that was the gardening bug, the veg growing bug began right there and then in the summer of 1970. I was 5 years old.
I mean, I think that's amazing, isn't it? To buy a house and move in at a time when you can harvest.
Well, they were renting. So but yes, but to move in the summer and to have a vegetable garden literally ripe for the plucking was quite something.
Yeah, absolutely. And you want to keep it going then. There's something that appeals very deep, I think, within us, that if somebody's gone to the effort, actually it's not that much effort to keep it going now.
No, and my dad took on that responsibility and has been a passionate veg grower ever since. And one of the pleasures for me of going to see them in Gloucestershire, is not too far from here, it's a couple of hours drive, is we swap plants and seeds all the time, particularly potatoes and tomatoes. He's trying out new varieties of tomato, and now I've found a few that he hasn't tried. And so we'll usually swap seedlings rather than seeds, because I'll put a load of seeds in and they'll be different. So it's like, why don't you have a few of mine and I'll try a few of yours? And in a few weeks' time, we'll be doing that again, as we have done every year for 20 years now.
There's something particularly special, I think all of us would agree, about growing from seed.
Absolutely, there is. Look, I'm not averse to doing a little bit of cheating. If I've got a couple of empty rows, I can pop into the garden centre and grab a few extra plants to get something going. But of course, it's way more satisfying to grow from seed and to grow from organic seed. But occasionally I will be either gifted a plant. The other thing I can't resist, actually, is people selling seedlings by the side of the road.
Exactly what you mean.
The honesty box system. Yeah. And if I drive past I'd actually adapt my routes. In fact, the reason I was late for you here today is because I went down a lane where there's a brilliant lady who grows all sorts of wonderful veg. And we're just getting to the time of year where she quite often has some of her seedlings, and you just put £1 in the box and you take a tray of broad bean seedling, and I can't resist.
Yeah. And even in an urban setting where I am, the local community garden not only sells some veg at harvest time, but also they lay on a terrific seed swap at this time of year.
Well, that's great, isn't it? Because, I mean, big villages and towns and cities are actually often hotbeds of really great organic gardening. Obviously, the whole allotment system lends itself brilliantly to seed saving and seed swapping, because you've got all these gardeners growing cheek by jowl and being obviously completely and highly justifiably nosy exactly about what everyone else is growing. And if someone's growing a kale crop, like I had a lovely tall walking stick kale with some big purple fronds of juicy looking leaves at the top, you can look at that and say, well, that looks better than my bushy little green kale, which is fine, but I want to try some of that next year. So, obviously those brassica seeds are super easy to save. So, yeah, I think all that, everywhere where people are growing next to each other, over the neighbour's fence, across the allotment, that's a really good opportunity for people to enthuse together and also talk about varieties and just nibble each other's vegetables and say, I'll have a bit of that next year.
And if you were to have to narrow it down for some reason and say, I haven't got much time this year, but I must grow these things, what would be your essentials?
Well, I think that. So Sarah Raven had a nice phrase, friend of mine and a great veg grower, as well as, of course, her amazing flower growing. And she talks about the unbuyables. And for me, I do like that thing of growing what's really hard to buy.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean obscure varieties. For me, it means things like peas and broad beans. I mean, of course, you can buy them frozen, but they don't really compare with things with the peas you grow in your garden and you can take straight to your kitchen and cook within minutes, or eat raw, which is actually what happens probably to more than half the peas that we grow in our garden, because the kids love them raw so much. The grown-up kids, that is. But so growing things that are delicious and that are hard to buy, but also growing things that just feel right for you. And then maybe not growing things that you might see as sort of staples that are easy to buy, of good quality. So I do grow some potatoes, but I grow delicious salady things like rats and pink fir apple and Nicola and those kind of potatoes. But I don't grow a main crop potato because I get lovely organic potatoes from lots of lovely West Country farms. Salads also are just brilliant to grow. They grow fast, they grow abundantly. I think I've experimented with, every year I grow them a little bit closer together. I want the lettuces to be almost touching each other when they're big enough to pick, so that you're really cramming them in there and getting loads of salad for your space. Obviously, you want to adapt to what sort of garden you've got. You're growing in a container. There are some. I mean, broad beans again for me, unbuyable. I mean, you can of course buy broad beans and peas in their pods in a farm shop, but the honest truth is, if they've been picked more than 24 hours ago, they're not going to have that amazing sweetness and deliciousness that you get from homegrown. So peas and broad beans are an absolute must for me. Lovely lettuces. I mean, maybe people think it's boring to grow lettuce. I never tire of taking lettuce, a really good, crunchy green lettuce, and that's extraordinary. I mean, for me, some of the most interesting flavors in the vegetable world are that interplay between things that are bitter and sweet. And then, of course, the textures of crunchiness and juiciness are also. But so a broad bean is bitter and sweet, and in a completely different way, lettuces are also bitter and sweet.
We're going into the propagation tunnel now. Oh, that looks marvellous. So we've got, oh goodness, about 12 or so kind of sections, I would say, of vegetables. They're just lovely, all growing in their little cell trays.
Just starting to peep through.
Oh, these lovely miniature seedlings. It's just magic, isn't it? So what have we got?
Spring onion, parsley, spinach, sorrel, kale, spring onions.
More basil as well.
Yes,
great, and it's just coming through. That's come through very recently, hasn't it? And the past.
Looks like it. That basil looks like it's germinated overnight, doesn't it? And look at the leeks here with their funny little bent over tops. Yes. They do this thing of
they double over.
They come up and then they release that, and then finally they almost look like a weeping willow, and then that bit comes upright when it gets a bit more straight.
Beautiful looped leeks. Yeah, and you've started off some peas as well, right here at the end.
We have.
This is very inspiring.
Bigger plugs, and look, the tips of the peas are just
lovely.
Through.
This time of year now, we're coming up to late February now, so that's why it's all very new and things are growing at tiny seedling stage. Of course, we are quite a long way south here.
Yes, we are, and we do go early here. Most seed packets say fairly sensibly, start sowing in March. Obviously, in the polytunnel, we can be very confident there aren't going to be any frosts, and we can get our seedlings going from early February, and we can sometimes even overwinter a few seedlings, hardier ones, and then get them out early. So we've got this moment of sort of explosion. The explosion. There's two kind of waves. There's the explosion in the propagation time, which is happening now, and then there's the from the sort of middle to end of March, when these seedlings start going out. The beds that we just walked from fill up so fast. But you've still got the hungry gap to contend with. They do. Once they go out, they're going to be sort of shivering, and they say, "Oh, why did you take me out of that lovely cozy polytunnel? Everything was going so nicely in there, and now you've put me out in the bed." And it's like, well, just get in there and get used to it and get on with it. And of course, seeds want to grow.
They do.
Plants want to thrive.
Yeah.
All you've got to do is let them.
Yeah.
Get them going, get them in at the right time, make sure they've got the nutrients. A big part of our growing philosophy, and the reason we do these small or narrow no-dig beds, is trying not to compact the soil, just to have that sort of free draining soil that doesn't get disturbed hardly at all, that doesn't get compacted. We know more and more in the world of organic gardening, and on a much bigger scale of regenerative farming too, just how good the soil is at rejuvenating its own fertility if we don't compact it and we don't dig it too much. And then the need, a good mulch on an uncompacted soil that hasn't been dug over is probably as good, if not better, as any, even organic fertilizer. You're just inviting that soil to stay warm, to stay moist, to do its slow but very dependable microbial work to just to regenerate its own fertility every year.
You have talked a lot about health and healthy eating, and in more recent years, the gut microbiome, and how eating more plants is critical for us. How much do you think the quality of our soil is connected to our guts?
Well, there's a direct connection. There's a direct line. I mean, what we put in our mouths and ends up in our guts has been grown in our soil. So, or hopefully as much of it as possible has been, because we believe in, we should be producing a lot of the food that we eat in this country, especially the plant food. We've got a fantastic tradition of horticulture in the UK, but it's a form of growing that's under huge pressure from the weather, from cheap imports from overseas, from ironically from the cost of things like fossil fuel based fertilizers that arguably we should be weaning ourselves off anyway. And I suppose one of my great hopes for both horticulture but also arable farming in the UK is that with the big conversation, with the wide recognition of just how healthy and robust organically grown vegetables can be, with the growing enthusiasm for people growing them at home and buying them as their first choice of vegetable, I'm daring to hope that we might be on course for some sort of tipping point. I mean, it's not going to happen this year or next, but when I say tipping point, the example I would use is maybe the example of renewable energy, where conversations about solar power and wind energy were quite fraught, even as recently as 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago. They were subsidized forms of energy. There was a sort of, there still is in some quarters an ideological questioning, but actually the economic argument for renewable energy is complete. It is the most inexpensive form of energy. That's now proved itself beyond economic. So
yes,
there's no question about it. And so I dare to hope that we might get to a similar position with regenerative and organic farming, where it just doesn't make sense to be spreading expensive fossil fuel based fertilizers or fertilizers that are derived from high heat extractive processes that cause so many greenhouse gases, which is essentially what ammonia based fertilizers have been doing for decades now, sending huge amounts of heat up into the atmosphere to get the nitrogen out. And that the regenerative alternative, which we were just talking about, that allowing that soil to regenerate its own fertility at the microbial level, as we do in our beds here, and as successful organic market gardeners are doing all over the country, actually becomes the no-brainer option for farmers everywhere.
And it's not just the economics of energy use, it's the economics of public health.
Absolutely, and the two are, of course, intimately connected. But yes, if we're serious about any government that's serious about tackling what we call the obesity crisis or the diet-related illness crisis, has to be looking at food policy and has to be helping its population find healthy food. Sometimes you could say that policy is too often directed at the wrong end of the queue. And people are saying we need to reduce the waiting lists for the NHS. And of course we must, and we do need to provide the best possible services in ways that help ill people get better as quickly as possible. But if we can help people not to be ill in the first place, at serious scale, then that is such a worthwhile enterprise. But it's never in the forefront of the policy promise or the policy mix of governments, successive governments, even those who look like they might have got it for a bit, then sort of put the issue of diet-related health on the back burner, which is the wrong place for it to be. It absolutely should be at the forefront of a health policy to help people eat well and not become ill in the first place.
We've just come into another polytunnel, which is wonderfully warm, a little bit damp in a kind of nice humid way, and it's got a fantastic crop. I mean, there's mustard leaves going on.
Yeah, got some rocket that's gone over the top here. We've got some red mustard. We're actually seeing even a few rocket flowers here.
I think they're my favourite flower. I just love them. When you look closely at a rocket flower, they are just beautiful.
They are, and they're also pretty tasty as well. They have a bit of that spiciness that the leaf has, but they've got that classic 4-petal brassica leaf shape.
Yeah.
And so they definitely think it's spring in here, don't they? We've got the rockets starting to go over the top, but still lots of nice pickable leaves as well. And this polytunnel...
Is this the salad tunnel? I think
it is. Yeah. It is for now,
yeah.
But the salad tunnel does become the tomato tunnel.
Right. Okay.
So we'll probably get a really good crop of another really good crop of salad in here, and things like radishes, spring onions, and then the tomato plants will go in just as the salads come out, and then in the high summer and early autumn, you walk in here and that amazing smell of ripe tomatoes will be an absolute overwhelming sense, with some companion planting of marigolds and basil and that kind of stuff happening in amongst them.
We, as you know, curate the Heritage Seed Library at Garden Organic, and that's over 800 varieties of vegetable, but 200 or so of those are tomatoes, because there is this extraordinary love affair with tomato varieties.
I'm right there. I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
Last year, we grew a whole bunch of lovely tomatoes that we hadn't grown before. Quite a lot of them from a brilliant local seed grower who I know you know, Tamar Organics, and also Vital Seeds. And we grew some really fun ones, like Brad's Atomic Grape, which is an extraordinary black thing, but it gets
a bit of green stripes going.
Yeah, and when it's properly ripe, a little streak of orange, and that tells you, along with the fact that it just gives a bit to the finger and thumb, incredible flavors. And then lovely big beefy tomato called Paul Robeson. The Mango Lassie was a lovely little red tomato, a bit like a gardener's delight, but a little bit smaller, very juicy and sweet. And and this year I've got some of those guys in as well, and I'm exploring some new ones. Ananas, which means pineapple in French. It's big yellow tomato, and I've managed to track down an old favourite called Brandywine, which is a huge reddy pink tomato that I actually grew in my first polytunnel at River Cottage many years ago. But I've had trouble tracking it down, but I found some this year, so I'm very excited about that.
We're just peering into a very small little netted tunnel just to see how it's all going, but it looks promising.
Yep, it does. It does. Some of those have got little sprouting tops. That's actually a great thing to throw in a stir fry. You can see that looks like it's sort of pak choi equivalent of purple sprouting broccoli. And of course, pak choi is a brassica. So one of the things I really like at this time of year is any overwintered brassicas. They all produce sprouts.
Right.
It's not just purple sprouting broccoli. So kale produces sprouts, the pak choi produces sprouts, and they can all be treated like the sprouts of purple sprouting broccoli. Some are a little bit smaller and will cook in an instant in a frying pan, or just in a steamer.
So leave stuff in. Leave stuff in, see what happens.
Well, leave stuff in, and if things start to bolt, it doesn't mean you haven't still got a viable crop. In the same way that we've got the little leaves bursting out all over the stalks of those red cabbages, most of which were harvested in the autumn, and then with this pak choi, we've got these sprouts. We can use the leaves too, but these sprouts can be used exactly like purple sprouting broccoli.
Gosh, I didn't know that.
Have a little taste.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Lovely mild leaf with just a hint of mustardiness that comes through on the third or fourth month.
But not too much.
No.
Yeah, lovely. Do you make your own compost here?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Obviously, we have peelings and outer leaves and things that come from the kitchen, and we try extremely hard to avoid any plastics and single-use plastics, which means we get quite a lot of stuff being delivered in cardboard, which is great to mix with the green stuff for a compost. So, and then we have cuttings from the hedges and mowings from various bits of the garden.
So obviously we're here in a farm setting. We're seeing things grown at scale. You've talked about your garden at home, which you grow for your own table. What would you say to people who think, oh, I don't know, gardening, it's all a bit complicated. It's not really for me.
Well, I would say stop for a minute and just give it a go. I mean, if you like the idea of gardening at all, just don't be afraid to give it a go. As we said, in the propagation tunnel just now, seeds, they want to grow.
Yes.
It's just such a positive act to grow some of the food that you're going to eat and feed to your family. And I think the satisfaction you get from it runs deep. And also being a veg grower, even on a small scale, makes you I think a much better veg shopper as well. Yeah. And of course it informs the way you cook and everything like that. It literally grounds you. I mean, that's literally what's happening when you grow a bit of your own veg. That's one of the reasons we've been so excited to release our own range of organic River Cottage organic seeds, just to get people on the first rung. So to begin with, we've just got 20 of the most obvious veg that people like to grow: the peas and the beans, the cabbages, kale, sweet corn, spring onions, radishes, beetroots, these kind of things. Only one type of each for the moment that we've chosen, because they're organic and because they germinate really well and because they're very, very rewarding. We just want to get more people growing their own veg at home. And so, do you know what? I also think very few people start growing veg and then go, do you know what? This is all too much hard work. It's the opposite. Once you start, you might scale back a little bit one year because you know you're going to be busy, or let one part of the garden just go a bit wild. But that idea of just having something growing in your garden that you can take to your kitchen or just nibble as you walk around, it just carries so much resonance. And what it stands for is something that's important, there's seriously important on a much bigger scale, a national scale and a global scale. What it stands for is resilience. Food resilience, food systems that are essentially local, that are self-supporting, that are community-based. And this is why I'm so happy to be talking to you and to be talking about the Heritage Seed Library, because this is a real issue. We cannot take the Earth's ability to feed us for granted, and we cannot take the future of industrial agriculture for granted. It's essentially depleting nature on the planet. We've got to find better ways, and we need varieties that are resilient and locally adapted. We need traditions of growing at a small scale, literally at home for yourself, but also small community gardens and small growers that go to market very locally. There are so many brilliant growers, so many of them organic, doing box schemes, going to farmers markets. And this is the network that we're just absolutely delighted to be a part of. And this is what puts down such an important marker for the future of how we need to grow food at a community level.
So, going back to growing is good for us, no, not only because we're getting out and doing something, but actually we're also eating stuff where we know what's gone in. We know the soil we've grown it in. We know whether or not we've sprayed it with anything. We know the facts. But what we're not very good at is understanding perhaps the nutritional benefits of different vegetables.
That's true, but we don't have to be experts. But it's worth grasping a few basic principles. And actually, in my most recent cookbooks, I've tried to help people a bit with that. And my last book was called How to Eat 30 Plants a Week, which some people think is quite a mad idea. But it turns out that when you include things like spices and nuts and seeds, and you're not just talking about vegetables, you realize that actually there's a real abundance of things. Tinned beans and pulses, they're all very, very valid plant foods, and we just need to mix them up and have lots and lots of them in our diet. And if the messaging around healthy eating has been a little bit confusing for a while, people sort of got very anxious about fat and then worried about sugar. There is at least now some real consensus about what healthy eating looks like. And it looks like a real diversity of mainly plant-based foods that are not overprocessed. So lots of fresh veg, lots of pulses, nuts and seeds, fruits, both fresh and dried. These should be at the heart of our kitchens. And one of the key elements of all these foods that matters so much for a healthy gut, that has been a big revival in the conversation about it, is fiber. So people were big on fiber in the 70s.
Yes.
And there was the Ep5 diet where it was recognized that if you eat lots of fiber-rich foods, it actually helps you feel full and may help people to lose weight. But it's not just to do that. That's not the only reason to eat foods that are full of fiber. It's so good for your gut microbiome. It's so good for your all the health underlying health markers are taken care of by lots of plant-based foods that are high in fiber. So my next book that's coming out in a couple of months' time is High Fiber Heroes. And I've just chosen 12 of the most accessible vegetables that everybody knows and most people like most of them. They include frozen things like peas and sweet corn and spinach, which you can have fresh or frozen, and tinned foods like simple tinned beans and pulses. And then there are lovely fresh cabbages and carrots and leeks, all the obvious stuff that are sort of sitting under our noses and are sort of more or less in season or available all year round and are not expensive. And I've made those the 12 chapters of the book, along with the lots of other great ingredients like nuts and seeds and spices that help to make them delicious. So High Fiber Heroes, and that's what the veg garden is full of.
Thanks so much to Hugh for joining me for this month's Organic Gardening podcast. Hugh's book, High Fiber Heroes, is hot off the press and available to buy now. If you've enjoyed listening, please recommend us to a friend or leave us a review on your preferred podcast app. We're trialling more regular uploads for the Organic Gardening Podcast, and we'd love to know what you think. Please get in touch via email, podcast@gardenorganic.org.uk or at Garden Organic UK on Facebook and Instagram to send in your feedback. We've also launched our Growers Against Glyphosate campaign this month. We want to eradicate glyphosate from our parks, gardens and growing spaces. You can sign the petition and write to your MP by visiting our website, gardenorganic.org.uk/Growers Against Glyphosate. All that's left for me to do now is to thank Kevin MacLeod for the music, and we'll see you next time.